with you on Monday. That means we are just a few days away from the start of week 1. And at 8 p.m. Eastern time, we will get things rolling with a power conference on power conference matchup. It will be the North Carolina Tar Heels going to play the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And while there was a time at FanDuel Sportsbook where you can make every moment more that the North Carolina Tar Heels were an underdog, as I pull it up here right now, the North Carolina Tar Heels are now favored by 1.5 at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more. We will save our picks or locks, obviously, for Thursday, hitting those Thursday games right at the top of the show, 11 a.m. Eastern time for your week 1 locks. But as we look at how we think these two teams might match up, of course, week 0 gave us all kinds of curveballs. Of course, both these teams are going to have new starting quarterbacks. They both also have new defensive coordinators. Maybe, different ways you could adjust to that news for each team. Danny, what are you looking at when it comes to North Carolina, Minnesota, and some of the biggest keys in one of the biggest toss-up games that we have between power conference teams?
How I am anxiously watching to see what Mac Brown does with these quarterbacks. Tom had the old axiom before: if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. Well, Mac Brown would quickly like to try to dispel that, because they are still trying to figure out who the one is, if it's Max Johnson or Connor Harrell. So that's one thing I'm very curiously watching with North Carolina, also to see if their defense has improved at all with Jeff Collins at the helm. And then I feel like Minnesota is just this team that kind of flying under the radar. Don't feel like I know a ton about them. I'm like, just, and I think we'll see a healthy dose of Amarian Hampton, the running back for UNC. But I'm genuinely, this is one of those games where I'm kind of like, I'm eager to learn both of these teams, what I think they're going to be this season.
I mean, to me, is Darius Taylor or Jackson going to play for Minnesota?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody betting this clearly thinks that one or both of those players are out. And Minnesota has pretty behind Jackson at receiver. So if he's out, I mean, their offense obviously probably won't be very good. I think Max Brosmer is a real upgrade over Kelly McManus, but I don't know that. I think he is. Maybe we'll see if that's actually true. I like a lot of UNC skill guys, man. I think they're really good, but I don't really think that they have a quarterback on this team this year. So we'll see. It's an interesting one, obviously, and I'm going to watch the heck out of it. But they did shut down Hampton last year pretty easily, and they basically said Drake May beat us, and Drake May did, because he threw for 450. So,
yeah, difference is it's a different Minnesota defense now.
Yeah, no Joe Rossi
with a different coordinator. It's like, I mean, but still, you could follow the similar kind of game plan, and I think it would be far more effective, because it's like they don't have Drake May anymore, and we don't know who the quarterback is. So if you can slow down Amarian Hampton in that run game, you could really kind of hamper what North Carolina's ability to do on offense. The question for me is, I don't know, like you said, if Taylor's out, if Jackson's out, I don't know what Minnesota has the capability to do on offense. To me, honestly, I'm very interested in this game, because these are two teams that I really don't have a clear read on going into the season. So to get a chance to see them will help me kind of decipher what these teams are. But this also strikes me as the kind of game that could look a lot like what we saw with Georgia Tech and Florida State, in that there will be limited possessions and the clock will be running, because I don't know how much either team will be throwing the ball. And if they are, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of deep passes. I think it's going to be, especially on the Minnesota part, I think we're going to see a lot of short passes, because that's kind of what Brosmer did while he was at New Hampshire or Delaware. I can't remember.
New Hampshire.
There we go. I don't know why I was thinking Delaware. Just Joe Flacco on the brain all the time.
Delaware State.
Yeah.
The Hornets covering the spread.
But I think we're going to see two very run-heavy offenses, and I think that's nothing new for Minnesota. I think that's just who they are. I mean, they run more often than everybody but the option teams the last couple of years. And I think North Carolina is probably going to have to rely on it. And I do think because of that, there's a good chance we see more of Harrell, because I do think that it's going to give him more of it'll alleviate some of the ability to take away Hampton if there's another quarterback in there that you actually have to fear as a runner. And I don't think Minnesota's going to look across the line of scrimmage at Max Johnson and say, oh God, we got to keep that guy in the pocket. He's going to kill us. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. I think this is probably going to be a sluggish, low-scoring affair.
All right. So I think and this is just going to be from the North Carolina side, because then I get to ask some questions. I think that not only do you have Amarion Hampton, but you've got Darwin Barlow, who comes over in the transfer and is his last year of college eligibility. He has been, very vocal about wanting to participate in helping this team out a lot. I think the tight end room, not just Bryson Nesbitt, but Copenhaver, and then all the way down to Jake Johnson, who we know can be a real weapon in an offense. I think the tight end room is loaded up. And while you don't have, the Tez Walker right at the very top, I think that between J.J. Jones and Nate McCollum and some of the rest of that wide receiver room, I'm not super concerned. The issue and the number one place where this goes really south for North Carolina is that their entire offensive line has been reworked. And that while they have one guy in Willie Lampkin, who's been there for a minute, but even not a very long time because he transferred into the program, it's a lot of new starters. It's a transfer from Georgia. It is a patchwork, put it together group that needs to be able to gel if they're going to win a sluggish game. Like if you're going to grind it out and run the football and just play a low possession game, you can't do it with a crappy offensive line or an offensive line that doesn't have their communication down. So that in a hostile environment on the road is the biggest question mark. Now, the question, does Minnesota, under new defensive leadership and with a lot of turnover, have the defensive personnel to overwhelm North Carolina at the line of scrimmage in a way that exposes what I think could be a concern for the Tar Heels? They do?
I think so. I think Minnesota's secondary is a far greater concern for Gophers fans than their line is. I think they got a pretty good D-line.
Yeah. Well, that to me is the biggest matchup question for me. Like quarterbacks, whatever, they'll figure it out.
This screams alt line to me.
Oh, like either way?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You want to elaborate for those not familiar with the
player availability uncertainty.
Yeah, both teams minus 6.5. That's my plan.
We have true pace uncertainty. UNC operates very fast. I assume that they will be somewhat slower this year because you don't have Drake May, but still, everything says that they want to go fast. Max Long been a guy that advocates tempo. You have Minnesota who wants to play really slow. There are so many different ways this game could turn out. One team could get game scripted out of its comfort zone very quickly. It's a low certainty game for me. Not to mention it's week 1, so.
Yeah,
half unit on UNC minus 6.5, half unit on Minnesota minus 6.5. Let's go.
Is that the way the math works? Does it work that way?
It's for me on this one. If it's a close game, I only lose 1 unit. If it's not, I win. I mean, it's
all right. Danny, I know you're tight on time, so you gotta